And hello, Hearts of Oak. Thank you so much for joining us once again. And it's wonderful to head over across the continent to Brussels to talk to Christine Anderson, MEP. Christine, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me. It's a
Great,
pleasure.
great to have you. And obviously, people can follow you there. Is your handle? All the links are in the description. And you have, of course, been an MEP for AfD, Attorney for Deutschland, since 2019, one of the, I think, 15 there in the European Parliament. And there in the European Parliament, you're a member of the Committee on Culture and Education and the Committee on Women's Rights and Gender Equality. And you're truth speaking on Islam, and that immigration clash must be I'd love to be a fly on the wall in some of those, in that committee especially. But I think the only time I've actually seen you in the same room was 2 years ago at CPAC, whenever you headed over to Bannon's War Room small gathering, and there was you, James O'Keefe, and Carrie Lake. And I remember that well, but that 2 years ago. So yes, that was the only time I've been. But I mean, the AF journey has been amazing. And I think I certainly forget there's only been 11 years since the AFD has been there. And UKIP that I was involved in was a 25-year program right to getting the Brexit vote. But could I ask you about your background? You've been with AfD right from the beginning, but what was your life like maybe before joining the AfD, before we get into the political side?
Well, what was my life like? I was, just a housewife, a mother. I was a stay-at-home mom. I took care of my three daughters. And yeah, it was more than a full-time job, I can assure you. So, and as they, grew a little older, and I began to have, some time to maybe, get to reading stuff. And what really triggered me back then, or what woke me up, was actually the subprime crisis in the United States in 2007. And in consequence, then the Lehman Brothers bankruptcy. And, you heard things like people were, kicked out of their houses, the banks reowned the houses and all of that. And I was like, what is going on there? Because this was happening on a large scale. And so I, kind of got into that and found out back then that, these people had literally been, these home loans, they had been pushed down their throats, right? So, and the next thing, of course, you come into the whole money system and, all of this. And that was like, at that point, it was when I started going down that rabbit hole. And I'm not at the end yet, because once you start, connecting the dots and reading this, that, and the other, I mean, it goes way back to the Tonkin incident and, all of that. And you start realizing that, all of the information that you may have been fed might not have been true, at least not its in entirety. So, and like I said, once you start going down that rabbit hole, you come to a point where you actually look down an abyss. And the more you look, the deeper it gets and the more horrifying it actually gets. So, and it was the year 2007. That was my waking up moment. And in 2005, I voted for the Christian Democrats and the former Liberal Party here in Germany, which I had done for my entire life. And in 2005, I still voted that way. In 2009, I could no longer do that. So I went to the polls, but I voted invalid, because not voting is not an option. If you think, you will punish the ones by not voting for them that you want to punish, you are actually strengthening them. You're supporting them by not going to vote. So by all means, every time cast your vote, go voting, and just vote invalid if you really don't find anyone you can support. So in 2009, I just voted invalid, and then 2013. And I will have to say that, political homelessness that I experienced during that time, I would have never thought that it would get to me to a point that it actually did. But it was a terrible feeling not knowing who I was represented by anymore, not knowing, what party I could support that would actually advocate for things that I wanted them to advocate for. It was truly a horrible feeling. And in 2013, there was some news program or some TV show, and I heard a new party being founded. AFD was the name, and they were critics of the European Union. And I'm like, whoa, what is this, right? And being critical of our currency, the euro. I'm like, yeah, this sounds interesting. So I turned off TV, got on the internet, and started researching that new party. And it was that night. It was like a March 2013. It was that night when I said, well, this time I'm going to get involved. And I mean, the others that I trusted to do the right thing apparently had failed me. So I had to do it myself. I got involved, became a member of that party, and here we are today.
No, I understand that political homelessness feeling
Yes.
here in the UK post UKIP. There's a lot happening in the UK, but still, yeah, I don't see reform hitting the nail completely, especially in the terms of Islam and that clash that we have in the West that you understand very well. But tell us about those early days, building up a party from scratch. 'Cause, I mean, I came into UK maybe 8, 9 years after it started, and it still was building. It was still a small party. What's that like to be right at the beginning of a political party challenging the consensus?
Right. Well, the overall and outstanding feeling was really, this optimism, this motivation. Now we're sort of getting off of the couch, being depressed about how things are going. Now we came into the action. And there was such a drive, it was such a force, we just kept going with it. And, yeah, there were a lot of challenges, a lot of uh, bureaucratic stuff that needed to be taken care of. We pretty much had no clue what we were actually getting ourselves into. The majority of the members of my party back then, we had never been a member of a party or been in politics before. So it was all completely new for us. But we were so motivated because it's really it's amazing, the feeling you kind of have when you get into the action. You finally have something you can work to. You no longer depend on the bureaucrats and all of the ones that had been riding the country into the mud pretty much. You were now called on and do something, and we were highly motivated, and that was like the overall feeling that we all had. But we tackled all of the problems, all of the challenges that we faced in getting things right and complying with all of the regulations and all of that. We got it done, and we had fun doing it, to be quite frank. And yeah, we were just, like I said, highly motivated. And the day no longer only had 24 hours. Gosh, it could have had 40 hours, but we were right there and, doing whatever was asked of us and whatever we needed to do. We were there doing it.
It's difficult with UKIP. It was a single issue, and people maybe disagreed on other issues, but they came together under one issue umbrella, and that made it fairly easy. With what AFD are doing and parties all across Europe, populist parties across Europe, it's more difficult because do you focus on tackling the EU problem? Do you focus on immigration? Is it on internal clashes and the change of demographics? Is it on the culture wars? Is it? And there are so many issues that we have
Yeah.
to face. What was that like, kind of bouncing up where you put your focus on?
Well, in the beginning, it was really the problem with the currency, the euro, and the EU institutions, because the EU institutions, they're not only undemocratic, they're downright anti-democratic. And I am quoting Nigel Farage here. He said that once, and he was absolutely right in saying that. So, but once you start really tackling all of the issues, and you named a few already, you realize it's, oh my God, what is the common denominator of all of these problems? And when you look carefully, you'll figure it out pretty quickly. The problem we're having is that they're in the process of abolishing democracy. They're in the process of, it's no longer government of the people, for the people, by the people. They're trying to switch it to a government of the globalitarian misanthropists, for the globalitarian misanthropists, by the globalitarian misanthropists. That is the issue overall. And all of these things that you already mentioned, you can look at whether it's the common currency in the EU, whether it's the national sovereignty, whether it's climate change, whether it's this transgender madness, whether it's flooding our countries with illegal immigrants. You take all of that and all of these measures that they're taking, which they're, telling us it's only for our own good, which is a blatant lie. It's not the truth. But take all of this and you will figure out, yes, they are doing all of this to abolish freedom, democracy, and the rule of law. So looking at the EU institutions, I mean, my government, I'm German, my government, they're not doing what I want them to do when they're sitting in Berlin. What do you think they're doing if they're even further away in Brussels? And that's exactly how it goes. They're removing the democratic processes further and further away from the people. They no longer want the people to be able to hold the elected representatives accountable simply by obfuscating who was actually responsible for that decision. The people don't know anymore. So they can't hold anyone responsible. So they're bouncing back the balls. My government in Berlin is telling the people, well, we would not have done that. We would not have told you can't have that heating system in your house anymore. It's them in Brussels doing it. So, it's pretty, like I said, they're removing the democratic processes away from the people and put it into unelected bodies. And that's what we're seeing all over the world, pretty much.
No, we are. Interesting on your growth, because there must have become like a tipping point. At some point, the authorities realized you were a threat and they had to deal with you. You've obviously had the onslaught from the media, relentless attacks on the AfD. You've had the attacks from the government trying to designate or define you as some terror group, extremist group, trying to ban you. At what kind of, when you look back, at what point was it that kind of the establishment woke up to AfD and realized we need to stop them?
Well, that pretty much started from the very beginning. I mean, to even question our membership in the European Union, and we had very good reasons for doing so. I mean, they are undermining our sovereignty. They are undermining the German citizens to take their own decisions and decide who should run things and who should decide things. They're undermining all of that. So we questioned, or not questioned, we point blank said that the euro, it was a grave mistake. We lost our sovereignty over our currency. And the Deutschmark was a very strong currency in the world. And so we lost all of that. What instead happened was in the beginning, as the euro started out, maybe I can talk about that just a bit. In the beginning, when the euro started out, you might remember Germany was called the sick man of Europe because our economic stats were so bad. And we were not competitive anymore. Why? Because we had, comparatively speaking, our wages were too high. But if you are in this common currency, you can no longer do anything about it. The only thing you can do is you can lower your wages. And that's what we did. So then speaking in these terms, we once were, again, competitive, but it only led to the fact that now other EU member states or Euro member states were not as competitive. So, and when the only thing you can do to raise your competitiveness is by lowering prices, lowering wages, then you will have this downward spiral, and you're actually in competition now with your neighbors that you're supposed to live with in peace. Now they have to lower their wages. So you have this downward spiral where all the countries, they need to continuously lower their wages to once again gain an advantage over the other Euro member states. This has nothing to do with living peacefully with your neighbor. This is competition right there. And who benefits from that? The industry, the world operating companies. They benefit from that, but not the citizens and not the people in those countries. So it started at the very beginning that they were labeling us as enemies of Europe. I mean, all of these things. And yeah, there were already hinting towards we're right-wing extremists and, all of this. But as we grew and as we got more support from the people, those accusations, and obviously it got worse. And now we're looking at, we can't even hold a party congress without 10,000s of people showing up trying to prevent us from having a congress. And they're not even, they have no qualms about physically hurting us, demolishing our cars just as we're driving to go there. Yeah, so there's a lot of stuff going on. They're trying to prevent us. And the point is just this. Once you look at it, we as Germans, we gave a promise to never again, right? But the thing is this, when people apparently no longer know what it actually was that started things in the direction of where the Nazis took Germany back then, they have no idea anymore. How did it start out? Because the Nazis did not start out by rounding up people and transporting them off to camps. That was the very last stage. It started with little incremental steps. And now we are at a point, even if I were to point out parallels, let's say what we've seen through the COVID years, if I were to point out, well, yeah, that's kind of how it started out. They were ostracizing people, and, depending on your vaccination status, public health is now the criteria for whether or not you are allowed to participate in public life. That's exactly what the Nazis did. It was public health concerns that the Nazis apparently, or obviously back then, awarded, to ostracize the Jewish population. And if I were to point out these parallels, then I run the risk of being charged with trivializing the Holocaust, which is punishable by crime. It's in our penal code, right? But how in the world are we supposed to live up to our promise to never again if we are not allowed to point out how they did it back then and that there might be parallels nowadays? If I'm not allowed to point that out, heck, we cannot live up to our promise.
How does free speech work then? As I think if someone wants to deny the Holocaust, they can, and then you can respond with evidence and proof and discussion, and you can then have a conversation and correct that that foolishness or that failing, lack of understanding.
No.
In Germany, you're not allowed that.
Yes, in Germany, denial of the Holocaust is punishable. It's in the penal code, and you will go to jail for it. Point blank.
Wow. How does that come? How have we given up the ability to reason and argue and persuade and just make? You don't change minds by making something legal. That's not how you win over support.
And you know what? And once again, I would like to refer back to the COVID madness, right? Had they not censored free speech, thousands and thousands of lives would have been saved, because there were very serious concerns about these despicable mRNA injections, but no one was allowed to talk about it. And the ones that did, they were being silenced. Social media was censored. You might recall the Twitter files that Elon Musk thankfully released after he had bought Twitter. So we have all this evidence now. Yes, they did censor speech, and it was them. It was them of all people talking about trust the science, and this is all scientifically based. No, it wasn't, and we have the proof for that. The Robert Koch Institute, which is like an equivalent of the CDC in the United States. So their job is to advise the German government on health issues, right? And we were told they were working independently and were, giving these advice to the German government, like we need lockdowns, and we need to put on masks, and yes, everyone needs to get the mRNA injection, right? So, and all of this, the German government made it out to be that they were advised by the Robert Koch Institute, and that was scientifically based. Well, guess what? It wasn't. Once again, it was a lie. The government had told the Robert Koch Institute what measures and restrictions they wanted to impose, and it was the job of the institution to provide them with some kind of a pseudo-scientific basis to justify it. It was exactly the other way around. How do we know this? Well, the minutes of their meetings have been leaked, and there is all the evidence there. So once again, I repeat myself, had there been free speech during the COVID years, thousands and thousands and thousands of lives would have been saved.
Yeah, and yet it's the AfD which are supposedly the problem, and the media whipping up that hatred. And I know Peter Bystrom has been on with us many times and discussed some of the horrendous attacks that you have faced with personal representatives and also at party events. But could I ask you about? I mean, there's been a massive change of the guard with Angela Merkel being chancellor for 16 years, with her stepping down in 2021, and that's led to, I guess, political vacuum in one ways, it seems, in Germany. Of course, we've just had the government in Germany collapse and then elections coming up, and we'll talk about that and Elon Musk and how he's shown a spotlight. But how does that kind of weak German government, it fits with a weak French government under Macron, and often that Franco-German alliance has been at the center of Europe, at the center of the EU. How does kind of that kind of political weakness at the moment in Germany and France fit into where the EU are heading?
Well, I mean, you quite rightly point this out. And this has been a phenomenal development. And it started on November 5th, right? In Germany, it started on November 6th because we didn't get the results from the elections until it was like 6:30 in the morning when they had called Pennsylvania to go to Trump. So, and from that point, it was clear that he's won it, right? That was it. So it was November 6th, 6:30 in the morning. We got the news. Pennsylvania called, okay, Donald Trump will be the 47th president of the United States. And the very same day, in the evening, the German government collapsed, right? So it was. So so what happened here was, so as you said, the CDU, the Christian Democrats, the former conservative party of Germany, they ran this country for 16 years under Angela Merkel. And who would have thought that a chancellor from the Christian Democrats would actually steal all of the program points from the Green Party? I mean, start out by, shutting down all of the nuclear power plants. And why did she do that? Because of a catastrophe that happened at the other end of the world, which would never happen in Germany, a tsunami. But this catastrophe in Japan, it killed more nuclear power plants in Germany than it did at the point of origin in Japan, right? So she started out with that. Then we had the marriage for all, right? I mean, all this transgender madness. So she implemented all of that. And now the Christian Democrats, they have been in opposition for 3 years now, right? Now they're coming around and telling people, yeah, well, we're going to do it all differently, right? So they're now criticizing the German government that's in power right now for all of the things that they themselves had implemented when they were in power for freaking 16 years. And they did not only say yay when they did, they were the driving force behind all of that. But now they've been 3 years in opposition, criticizing this, that, and the other, which they had been responsible for. And once again, a lot of people say, yeah, well, yeah, see, they're talking now the right talk, that this is what we want. There isn't going to be any change if they, once again, put the Christian Democrats in power. You will have the same crap all over again. It's the same. So to me, it's sometimes frustrating that people will simply forget that they've been the ones responsible for it. But here we are. So they're in the polls up. They might come in as the strongest party. But the point is this: even if they didn't come in strongest party, even let's say my party came in as the leading party after the election, they would probably do the same thing what they have done in Austria, just ignore the winning party, only to then come back later and said, well, it didn't work out. Now you can't do it, right? But it's just insane. Or they might pull stuff like they have been pulling in Romania, where they simply annulled an election because someone got elected that they didn't like. Yeah, we are pretty much a threat to their democracy. When they're always talking about our democracy is being threatened. Yeah, well, they're actually the threat to democracy. This is a very important difference here, right? So, but I mean, they're not even hiding it anymore. What they're doing now, they're coming right out in the open and saying, well, if the guy that we didn't want got elected, then we just annul the elections, right? Yeah, it's in Germany, right after Donald Trump was elected to the White House again. Excuse me. Was elected to the White House again. The very first thing they all came out and said was, well, look at what happened in the United States. Now we do need to censor social media. Otherwise, we'll run into the same problem they have in the United States now. They are not hiding anymore. They're right out in the open, exposing their totalitarian mindset. And it's disgusting, if you ask me.
No, they aren't. I want to get onto that just to mention that the CDU, maybe after 3 years, are claiming they actually would fix things. It's even worse in the UK. We've got only 6 months ago, the Conservative Party lost, and they're claiming they will fix things. So we've even got a shorter memory than the Germans. We've got 6-month memory.
Yeah.
But we're only 2 weeks into 2025. Trump isn't even in the Oval Office yet. That's another week to go or less. But Elon Musk has been shining a light, first of all, in the UK, when he posted Free Tommy Robinson on the 1st of January, and I stared at my phone and thought I was still dreaming, and then focusing on the grooming gangs, and then on to the AfD and Germany, saying without the AfD, Germany can't exist, that they need the AfD. Tell us what that has been like. I listened to maybe half of the X Spaces with Musk and Alice, the leader of the AfD, and it was fascinating to see that happening and to listen to that. But what has that been like for you as a German, having the spotlight on Germany, on the AfD, from one of the most powerful men in the world, Elon Musk?
Well, quite honestly, it was about damn time. Seriously. No, it's been phenomenal. This is just an indication that yes, things are changing now. The wind is changing, and that is prompting our political opponents to even become more absurd in their demands. But things are changing now, and as you said, Donald Trump isn't even in the White House yet. But I mean, things changed from November 5th on, so all over the world pretty much. So Hamas suddenly, decided, yeah, we want kind of for peace talks now. Let's talk about it, right? Putin already said, yeah, I'm going to sit down with Donald Trump and we'll have a talk, right? So things are changing, and they're losing their ground, and they are terrified. They're literally terrified of losing their how shall I put this, their power to interpret the truth or interpret what's right and wrong, and they are losing right now. And yeah, they're terrified because with that they will lose positions of power, they will lose governments, and we've already seen that. Like I said, in Austria, in France, the government imploded. It's happening all over the place, and I'm really looking forward to the times ahead of us now. And but once again, Elon Musk speaking out for us and supporting us and advocating for us. Oh my God, they were so furious when he did that. But keep in mind, and of course they came out, this is a foreign interference in elections. And that's Twitter's or the X space between Alice Weidel and Elon Musk. They had 150 bureaucrats here listening to it, to find points where they could charge us with illegal donations or whatever they're coming up with. So, but at the same time, they don't have a problem when George Soros, comes up publicly supporting the Social Democrats here in Germany, or Bill Gates, doing the same thing. It's quite okay for our president to call Donald Trump a hate preacher, which he did once he got elected in 2016. So that is perfectly and totally fine. But don't let Elon Musk, voice his opinion on my party. Oh my God, all hell breaks loose. But it's like they're desperate at this point because they know fully well they're losing and things are changing now. And we can even see that in his house. After the election, we had elections for EU Parliament in June of this last year. And theoretically speaking, there is a right conservative majority in the House now. And we've been able to demonstrate that a few times already. And I mean, they're terrified. They're terrified of not being able to just go ahead as planned with their sickening, despicable agenda of disenfranchising all the peoples around the world and removing freedom, democracy, and the rule of law, because that's really what they wanted to do, and they're failing.
Yeah, they are. Tell me about, because the election is, what date's the election in February? German election?
It's February 23rd.
Okay.
It's the election for the German Deutsche Bundestag, so the national parliament in Germany.
And tell us, because in the last election, after I think we're doing 13, 14%, and then the election, they end up with about 10%. At the moment, you're polling about 20%. And every regional election, you seem to do better and better. And the shock across Europe that the AfD have won time and time again without any reference to why you're winning. And no one wants to look at that. But so tell us what the current kind of situation is with. I've watched every regional election. AfD are coming first or second, and it is completely changing how the political consensus, I guess, works in Germany.
Yeah. Well, the point is this: the people are beginning. Some people are beginning to realize that every single thing we have been saying for 11 years. It was not fear-mongering. It was not right-wing populist kind of conspiracy theories. It was true, because it's now all, they see it now every day. So, And whenever you have a situation, their cognitive dissonance, on the one hand, you're being told it's all good in Germany and we need diversity and flood the country with even more of illegal immigrants. It's enriching us. No, it's not. And people are seeing this, right? And that discrepancy between what they're being told by their TV and what they're seeing in their everyday life, this discrepancy, I mean, it's so huge by now. And people are just fed up. On top of that, their attempts to slander us, to frame us as right-wing extremists, as Nazis, it's not working anymore. I mean, literally anyone who disagrees with what the now German Bundeskanzler says is considered a Nazi. Seriously? It's not working anymore. People are fed up. And they're just realizing that what they've been told by their TV is simply not true. This has been going on, but they're doing everything they can to always, push us back down. So last year they had on January 10th, by the way, so only pretty much 1 year ago, they came out with this news story that my party allegedly held a conference where we discussed deportation of German citizens, right? And they even had like a reference. Oh, and by the way, the conference took place only 8 kilometers away from the Wannsee conference. They just stuck that in there. For those who do not know, the Wannsee conference took place, I think it was in 1942, and it was the conference that where the Nazis planned their final solution for the Jews. So, but this reference, just sticking it in there, right? It was quite clear where they were going with this. None of that was true. It was neither a conference that my party had organized, and there were no talks about deportation. And I have to maybe clarify, in Germany, deportation, we don't use that word because that goes straight back to the Nazis deporting the Jews. So we don't use that word ever, right? Because it's strictly for, yes, you are being transported off by force. We came up with this concept of remigration. It's a whole concept of how we would like our country to be run in the future in terms of accepting migrants to come in, and the ones, that ask for asylum and have been denied, of course, they need to go back. So, but they blew this completely out of proportion, with the reference to the Wannsee conference and deportation and all of that. And thousands and thousands and thousands of people took to the streets and had protests against my party. So they were capable of pushing us down a little bit, but it didn't have the success they had dreamt of. And the only reason they launched, because trust me, this story, they would have wanted to run with this during this election campaign. They had it, because the conference took place like 3 months before they ran the story, but they had it in their backhands, and they wanted to run it in this election. And then the farmers' protests happened, and they became so huge, so uncontrollable. And so I guess they decided, well, we have to run this now. That worked, by the way. Once that story came in the open about our conference, the farmers' protests, they were done. Yeah. There was no mention of them anymore anywhere in mainstream media. It was dead from that point on. So they were successful in accomplishing that. But I guess they blew their ace, or they alleged ace they thought they had against us for this election. And now they're there. They don't have anything. So, they're trying to charge us with illegal party donations, foreign interference. I mean, the whole shebang, right? But it's not working anymore. People are fed up, and they're fed up rightly so. And it's about time that things change.
Let me just ask you about especially for our US viewers, the War Room Posse, the AfD always do or have done better in east part of Germany
Yes.
than the west, and you still seem to have that divide where the eastern part of the country wants to be German, understands what it means for that national identity. The west part seems to have gone the way of the EU. Is that a kind of a fair assessment?
Yes, it is. And the only or the explanation for that is probably a combination of some factors. So factor number one, the people in the eastern part of Germany that have lived through totalitarianism under GDR, under the Soviet rule, they have learned how to read newspaper. It's not important what the newspaper says. It's way more important what it doesn't say and what is written between the lines. They have learned to distrust everything they're being told by their government. And truth be told, things were way more honest in GDR than they are nowadays in the Western democracies. Why? Because the people in GDR knew they were being lied to. The government in GDR knew we're lying to our people. It was understood that they are lying to each other, and everyone knew it. In the Western democracies, we are still thinking that our elected governments, they're just looking out for our best interest and for our own good. No, they're not. They have other interests. And it becomes quite clear that that has nothing to do with bettering people's lives. It's always about making corporations even richer than they already are. So, and because they have lived through that totalitarianism, they recognize the mechanisms and they see it's just what happened 40, 50 years ago, right? And they're more astute. They're more sensitive towards that. So that is the one explanation. The other explanation is simply the following. In Western Germany, and that goes for all Western democracies pretty much, we are spoiled, rotten brats. I mean, it's not even funny anymore. Most of the people think freedom, democracy, and a rule of law, well, it just fell out of a blue sky on one fine day and boom, there it was. No, it wasn't. It had to be fought for. Our fathers and forefathers, they literally had to wrestle it from the former rulers. They spilled their blood over it to make sure that their children, children's children would live in a better and democratic world. But we no longer talk about this. There is like no appreciation for the sacrifices that had been made to ensure that we would live in democracies. So there is no value to that anymore. And now the people are thinking freedom, democracy, and a rule of law. Yeah, that means that you have to flood your own country with millions and millions of people that despise our society and make no secret of it. They're openly despising us and they're fighting against us. They're attacking us every chance they get. So what we did, we tore down the external borders, our nation's borders. But what that actually means is you will have to erect little small borders all over the country. And we're seeing this. We are barricading off our Christmas markets yet. We're barricading our social events like our fun fairs, whatever. We're barricading it off. You have to show your purse to get into it. It's insane. Yeah, that's what happens if you tear down the external borders. I mean, people are locking the doors to their houses. Why are they doing that? So the people inside the house can be safe. But once you unlock your door and leave it wide open, you will start locking the individual rooms in your house to be safe. But that is not how it's supposed to go.
Let me finish off on just picking up that just to finish, because you look at the difference between maybe Hungary and Poland and even down Romania, Bulgaria, where it's open, and yet you look, the further west you go, the more restrictions we need to have for some reason. But it couldn't, of course, be Islamic terrorism. No, because we can't talk about that.
Exactly.
But you understand this issue, and we've obviously had it highlighted with the grooming gangs, and highlighted with Tommy Robinson, highlighting these attacks of these gangs. And Angela Merkel opened up the German border. She said, "Come, come,"
Right.
and you've had mass Turkish immigration, especially, and possibly Syrian and others. But are people wakening up to that? Because Germany is not as far gone as maybe the UK and Sweden, but yet you're facing the same attacks on your identity, your culture, and attack on women, in effect.
Yes.
Are people wakening up to that?
Yes, they are. And that's why they're so adamant about, censoring speech about that. So, but the truth simply is, in Germany, we have no longer just random daily knife attacks. These random knife attacks are happening on an hourly basis. In Germany, we are no longer talking about just simple rapes. We're talking about brutal gang rapes, and they're also happening on a daily basis. I want to remind you, the New Year's Eve in 2015. Yeah, it was insane. Thousands of women had been sexually assaulted, and we have 3 or 4 convictions. Seriously, there were thousands of men there. They were just, yeah, it's insane. Now we're talking about we should have separate carriages on trains so women can travel safely through the night. Seriously? So what we're in essence doing is we're establishing the gender apartheid that is the norm in these Islamic countries. That's what we're doing. But we are at the same time burying our free, liberal, and democratic societies. For what? So that the industry can pick out these few jewels that are among these so-called refugees, to pay them half the price of what they would have had to pay a German engineer, let's say, right? But the 99 point, I don't know how many percent of the totally unqualified workers is being dumped on the social welfare system, right? It's insane what we're doing. But yeah, people are catching on to that, and they're realizing that, once again, as I said earlier, what your TV tells you, that has nothing to do with reality, and people are realizing that.
Yeah, people are waking up to that all around the world.
Yes.
Christine Anderson, MEP, it's wonderful to have you on, and it's exciting to see what's happening not only in the States, in the UK, there in Germany, all across Europe. People are wakening up to the many threats that we face, and they want their countries back. And that's what I think we are seeing, and looking forward to seeing those results in 6 weeks only, the German elections. And we wish AfD all the success, and excited to see what happens from that. So, Christine, thank you so much for giving us your time.
Thank you so much for having me. I had fun talking to you.